Adi, so looking now back in history and looking at a moment in history that is perhaps a little bit less known around the world, what do you think is sort of most important to know for those who aren't familiar with the story about this chapter?
Well, we have to remember, as you just mentioned, that in 1948 there were almost 1 million Jews in the Middle East and in North Africa, and now there are none. So this is not how a peaceful immigration or a voluntary immigration looks like. It looks like a forced immigration. So beginning in the 40s, with the creation of the State of Israel, first the countries around Israel, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, Yemen, there was one wave of Jews who had to leave these countries. And then when North African countries received their independence from France, Jews understood that they cannot remain there anymore, and then there was a second wave in the end of the 50s and the beginning of the 60s. But at the end of the day, we have a situation where the entire Arab world is simply void of Jews. Jews felt that they cannot stay anymore. So that's the bottom line, and that's the most important.
Adi, briefly describe a little bit the situation, the conditions in which those hundreds of thousands of Jews left these areas in the first wave in 1948.
So if we're talking about countries such as Egypt or Iraq, we had a situation where the Jewish community became simply under attack, under an, you can say, orchestrated attack by both the government and the population, where hundreds of Jews were arrested with no real charge. Prominent Jews were hanged in the middle of the street, in the main squares, such as in Iraq. People were sacked, bank accounts were frozen, and they were sacked from their jobs. So there's a situation where you understood that you're not welcome anymore. And again, these are people who were there before Islam, before the advent of Islam. So it's a 2 millennia old Jewish community.
We're in the studio about that because I know that's an issue that you see as important. The role, as sort of Lynn is beginning to point to, of that history, of that exodus of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa to today's talk of a peace process.
Yes, I think it's extremely important. First of all, we have to look at it. These Jews are an indigenous group of the Middle East. And sometimes the State of Israel and Zionism entirely is being portrayed as a foreign, European, colonialist, imperialist, whatever name you want to add, as a foreign project, whereas, as you just said, 2/3 of this state are from the Middle East, from Cairo, Baghdad, Aleppo, etc. So this is the first point that we have to remember. And the second point is that, again, people tend to see the State of Israel as a haven for the Jews who came from Europe, who fled the Holocaust and Christian anti-Semitism, whereas in fact, the State of Israel is a haven for the Jews who came from Arab countries and from Muslim countries as well. Just a quick example, in 1951, in 1950, as just Lynn mentioned, when the Jews of Iraq were in real physical danger, there was no country on earth who helped them out. And this was only 5 years after the Holocaust, so you would imagine that, the world would learn some kind of a lesson, whereas the only country on earth, and happily and obviously, the State of Israel accepted them. So it's a haven. The Zionism, in fact, is the response for the Jews from Arab countries as well, not only for the European Jews.
Some people, some Israelis even saying, if we reach a peace agreement with the Palestinians, coming to some compensation or somehow connecting it with the Palestinian situation, the Middle East Jewish is the same. Is this historically justified?
Now, that's true. First of all, the numbers are quite similar. In the case of the Palestinians, we're talking about 700,000. In the case of the Jews, we're talking about 900,000. At least for the Jews from Syria, Iraq, Egypt, they had to flee these countries because of the war, so it is connected. The Arab world and the Palestinians started a war, they attacked the State of Israel, and amidst of all that, the Jews of those countries, the communities, became hostages and became enemies of those countries and had to flee. But we have to remember something. Whereas Jews who lived in Arab countries were simply peaceful citizens and did nothing to harm their neighbors, the Palestinian population here was part of the war. They attacked Israel. So it's not, the parallel is not the same, because these are peaceful citizens and these are combatant side. However, Bill Clinton, when he promoted his peace plan in 2000, suggested that there would be an international fund that would compensate Palestinian refugees and Jews from Arab countries. So it is on the table. To me personally, I'm not aside to this because I'm not going to gain anything, but it sounds reasonable that after 70 years both sides can, have this fund. The only problem is that the Palestinian side for now insists on their right of return and insists that they have a right to return to this country. But I think the compensation offer of both sides is reasonable.